Ofsted Inspector David Humphreys is back at Chosen Hill, a school he inspected 7 months ago. The inspection process has changed dramatically and now concentrates on senior management teams and their own self-evaluation.
Hi there.
Hello, morning.
Good to see you again.
Absolutely. Shirley Bridget?
Lifetime, it's just Hello, Shirley.
Great.
For this film, we've asked 2 inspectors to do something they don't normally do: return to schools they've recently visited. So what do head teachers need to do to get top marks? The inspectors say, take more risks in the classroom. Chosen Hill is a specialist technology college with 1,400 students on the outskirts of Gloucester. Their original Ofsted verdict was very positive, but there was one area of concern.
I suppose the weaknesses we thought were to do with quality of teaching, which was good overall, but particularly in the sixth form and in Key Stage 4, we were seeing some outstanding teaching, innovative, imaginative, that was really gripping youngsters' attention, and they were responding very positively to that. That was less evident in Key Stage 3. I suppose teaching was just a little bit more mundane. We didn't think it was really building on what pupils had done in primary schools, and so there was just a sense of marking time in Key Stage 3.
As a result of the report, improving the quality of Key Stage 3 teaching has been the priority for head teacher Sue Turner.
You pointed us to look at slightly more imaginative ways of teaching that would actually give that sort of edge. We took on the idea of the joint observations as a piece of work that would actually help us check some of that. Now it means that our 4 core areas, design, maths, English and science, those 4 members of staff are now doing observations with a very different focus.
Right.
And they've been working with pastoral leaders and the senior leadership team on paired observations.
It should enable you to do 2 things. One is to monitor and test out whether that's happening, but also to identify where it is happening and share that type of practice.
Well, absolutely.
David believes it's vital that teachers are encouraged to experiment more.
There is an abundance of good, competent teaching. I'd love to see more inspired, innovative teaching that really grips youngsters' imagination and takes them forward into new territories. Now, sometimes you see that. It would be good to see more of it.
He wants to see how the joint observations work. There's always a non-specialist, like Karen Roberts, head of English, working with the subject leader. Today, they're observing a Year 7 maths lesson. The topic is graphs. Unusually, the teacher, Matt Day, plans to spend 3/4 of the lesson on a practical activity. First, a starter.
What I want you to do is I want you to spend exactly 30 seconds to write down all of the places that you see graphs in real life. As in, all of the places you see graphs outside of a classroom. How many have you got? 2. Yeah.
TV adverts on posters.
Right, slow down. TV adverts, certainly. Can you think of a particular TV advert or a particular type of advert that you might see?
Some of them are like food adverts, saying how much of like one chemicals in it and...
Exactly, so contents of food, certainly you will do. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a couple of experiments to see what happens. We're then going to graph our results. And hopefully what's going to happen after that, which will probably be next lesson by then, we're going to look at the rules that go with those graphs.
Many teachers are not as prepared to take a risk, particularly when other people are watching them. But if they get more used to peer observation and joint observations, and the whole idea of graded observations become absolutely part of practice, then I think you take the risk. So I suppose it's becoming more open about your classroom, not just having open doors, but talking about what went well with colleagues and trying then to experiment together.
Okay, Was this held up? I didn't see that bit.
Yeah.
You did that, did you? I didn't see that bit. Okay, fair enough.
More than a second or less than a second? Less than a second. So, while they are different, those gaps are pretty small.
Right, that's your 2-minute call because the first group is finished. So that's your 2-minute call. Go back to your seats and sit down. Leave the stuff where it is. Right, just sit down, please. What we're going to do is we're going to have a plot of those results and see what happens. So we're going to try and produce a graph. Now, what we're going to try and do is we're then going to try and see if we can find a rule, find our algebraic rule that actually works, so that without doing the experiment, we could find out what the extension would be, what the 3 periods of the pendulum would be. We can then guess and say, well, what's going to happen if we put, say, 650 on or 612 on? So that's the direction we're going to go. So the 2 graphs you're going to be drawing today, the first one's going to look something like that. You've got your mass along the bottom, up to 700 grams. You can work out the scale. It needs to be at least half a page big.
Because on that one, that's what I'm drawing out.
Yeah.
On the length, it goes up to
240, right.
So I need to make sure that the side I can reach to 240.
Right.
And I thought 10 is probably oh, I'm not sure because I reckon it's going to be too short. But I was just checking.
Can you think of a way you could have worked that out in advance? Without kind of drawing it and then having to rub it out?
No, I could have just counted up in tens.
Yeah, I think if you think about how far you want to go and how many squares you need for each one, that would help you. Good. I think there was a conscious attempt to build on some of the things we'd said about encouraging independent learning, practical work, taking a risk, doing things in a more imaginative way. So I think there has been an impact of the things we were saying to them. Where I thought he hadn't anticipated the range of competencies that pupils would have was in drawing the graphs.
Do you think it should start there? Because you've gone up in 2 squares, haven't you? And the distance from that is also 100, but that distance there is wider. So your first one needs to be in 2 squares as well. Which is fine, you'll be able to rub that out, so it's in pencil.
There were some who were quite confident at constructing a suitable set of axes with a sensible scale, and others were really struggling with that. I'm not clear that Matt really anticipated that being such a problem. I think what it comes back to is the amount of time spent on practical activity. If that had been reduced and they had been drawing the graphs at an earlier stage, there would have been more scope for him to discuss issues of how do you scale the axes, what scale have you got, to support youngsters who are struggling with that and deal with their needs.
Okay, so plot the point, close your books, face forward.
The feedback will be tricky. David doesn't want to discourage Matt from doing things differently.
I thought classroom management was excellent.
I mean, I'd echo the strengths that Karen's just identified. I mean, it was really well organised, and with that number of youngsters in a room to undertake those sort of practical activities is a sort of leap of faith, really, that it's going to work out, and it did. I suppose, building on what Karen was saying, I wondered whether there was enough maths in the lesson. And I feel kind of hypocritical saying that, because I absolutely applaud what you did in terms of introducing a practical activity into maths,
yeah,
and to trying to relate the graphing to the real world and to their own experiences, and to have them working independently on something. All of that was first rate. But it was only really at the end, when they started to begin to plot the graphs, that the maths came in. And I wondered if you might have thought about, rather than everyone doing the 2 practical activities, half of the class doing one, and half of the class doing the other. So they could actually then have got on with the graphing.
Yeah, earlier on.
I
did think about
the mathematics of it and
doing something like that, but it's just that the pendulum experiment takes so much longer than the springs, which is why I did them different to start with.
Right.
And I think that the timing would have... But I take your point totally, but I do think the timing might be more difficult.
Yeah.
But I think, hopefully, next lesson, they've got a really good basis now to do quite a lot of work on the things that you're talking about. But yes, I do agree.
David's keen to find out if the students have noticed any change.
You say they push you more.
Yeah.
So how do they do that then?
Well, they keep us not entertained, but they keep us interested in the subject, like, so it's interesting and we don't get bored with it, like, after loads of lessons.
What is it that makes it enjoyable? I mean, what type of things do you do in your lessons?
English, maybe. You go onto the internet and revise facts about Shakespeare, which we did.
Right.
Just a minute, go into the library and find out lots of facts about that.
In English, like, you get to do, like, plays and stuff. You get to write your own scripts. Like, they give you a storyline and, like, you have to base it on the storyline, but you can, like, just say, like, whatever you feel like, as long as it's to do with the storyline, and, like, you get to act it out and everything.
Right.
Maths of things are, like, colourful, and a lot of games are brought in, and then you think, how did I learn that? And you just kind of, you learn without knowing it, because, like, I can remember doing an algebra sort of game, and then at the end he asked us some really hard questions, and I was just like, whoa, I can do it, and not knowing that I've learned it, really.
It's been absolutely fascinating. It's also been quite heartening because I think they took very seriously the issues we raised with them in November.
But when the heat of this reaction kicks
Meanwhile, David's colleague, Ofsted Inspector Janet Mercer, has returned to a school she inspected 6 months ago. Walton High is a comprehensive in Milton Keynes with 1,300 students. Janet also wants to encourage teachers here to be more imaginative in the classroom.
Well, I come from an art and design background, so I'm very fond of the notion of creativity in the classroom and anywhere else, really. But the idea that we should be trying out different things. And I think key to that is the ability to think of new and interesting things to do, but not to be afraid of doing it and not to worry too much if they don't quite work out. Participation in it. Definitely.
Janet's particularly keen that NQTs focus on what's actually being learnt and aren't afraid to take risks.
What are the sort of things that you would feel that might prevent you or other colleagues from really doing this?
Obviously, fear of failure. You don't want to make a mistake. And if you do something that might lead to you make a mistake and you're not comfortable with it, then you just don't want to try it.
It's the class as well. You're not going to try out something that involves getting them all up and running around the class if you've got a group that you know it's going to take you 10-15 minutes to settle them down.
With your teaching group, once you've tried something and it's failed, and you kind of walk away and think, oh, that was terrible, how's that going to... And they come in the next lesson and they're kind of, what are we doing today, miss? Let's carry on. They've forgotten it, you carry on, and you realise that actually, what is the fallout from that at the end of the day? I evaluated it, I wouldn't do it quite like that, I'd change these points to try and make it work better next time. And therefore, I think once you failed on something, or you feel personally you failed on something, but realise it's not really the end of the day.